At 28,000 feet, Flight FL-312 was supposed to be just another routine trip to Portland, until two F-16 slid into formation outside the windows, and an A-10 Warthog broke away from its patrol to join them. In seat 17A, a quiet single dad clutched a worn backpack while his 8-year-old daughter slept on his shoulder, unaware that the entire U.S. Air Force seemed suddenly interested in one name on the passenger list, Ethan Dale. When the radio crackled and a cold military voice asked, "Confirm, is Ethan Dale on board?" The captain went pale, and the sky itself began to close in around a man who had spent 10 years pretending he was dead. What could a simple mechanic have done in the past to make fighter pilots panic, divert an A-10, and call him by a call sign the world believed buried? Reaper 6. Why did 18 soldiers insist on stopping a commercial flight just to see him one more time? Stay with this story until the end to discover the truth behind the ghost on row 17. And if you love emotional, cinematic narratives based on honor, sacrifice, and second chances, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notifications so you don't miss the next story. Up in the cockpit, far from the churning rumors that haven't started yet in economy, the air is already heavier than it should be. The instrument panel glows with ordinary data, altitude, speed, heading, all of it boring by design. The captain and first officer sit in companionable silence, riding through turbulence they've seen 1,000 times before. Then the radio crackles, a sharp sound that slices through the drone of engines and routine. Flight FL-312, this is Air Defense Command. Do you copy? A voice says, firm and stripped of small talk. The captain frowns, reaches for the handset, and answers with the trained calm he's worn for years. FL-312, we copy. Go ahead, he replies, even as a knot begins to tie itself in his gut. We require immediate verification of your passenger manifest. The voice continues, without a hint of apology for the interruption. The first officer glances over, eyebrows raised. This is not the usual how's the ride. Call from control. Understood, the captain says slowly. What exactly are you looking for? The first officer pulls up the digital manifest, scrolling through rows of names and seat assignments glowing on the screen. Static hisses for a heartbeat before the voice on the radio becomes precise and surgical. We need confirmation for a passenger named Ethan Dale, the controller says. Repeat, Ethan Dale. The name hits the air with the weight of something preloaded with meaning neither pilot understands. The first officer scans the list until his finger stops at row 17A. There it is, simple, unremarkable typeface on a glowing line. Confirmed, he says, throat dry. Ethan Dale, seated in 17A. Silence answers him, but not the comfortable kind. This one lingers, thick, as if someone's deciding what to reveal next. The captain feels the hairs on his arms stand up under the cuffs of his uniform. FL-312, the voice returns at last. Maintain your current course and altitude. Do not alarm the passengers. The lack of explanation is more disturbing than any emergency checklist could ever be. Command, can you clarify the nature of your concern? The captain asks, dropping the polished tone for something closer to human. He's flown enough to know when procedures are being followed and when they're being invented on the fly. Information is restricted at this time. The voice says, clipped. Follow instructions and maintain heading. The first officer stares straight ahead, but can't stop glancing at the radar display. Something's off, he mutters, barely loud enough for the captain to hear, let alone the radio. As if on cue, two shapes appear ahead, distant at first, then growing fast. In seconds, sleek silhouettes of F-16 fighters slide into view, cutting through clouds with the precision of scalpels. They settle into formation, one on each side of the commercial jet, far too close for anyone to call this routine. The first officer's breathing hitches as he watches them match speed with unsettling ease. This is no training flyby. This is a statement. The captain picks up the radio again, unable to pretend this is anything but serious. Air defense, we have two F-16s in tight formation off our wings. Can we please get an explanation? There's a brief pause. Then the voice returns, colder and even more focused. Confirm visual that passenger Ethan Dale is physically on board. The controller orders. The captain exchanges a look with his first officer, both men fully aware that this is well past normal protocol. "We've confirmed the manifest," he says, trying to keep his voice level. Why this level of response for one passenger? Another pause, longer this time, as though someone on the other end is deciding just how much to say. When the answer finally comes, it's not an explanation so much as a warning. "If that's the Ethan Dale we think it is, Captain," the voice says quietly, "you're carrying a ghost." The cockpit feels a few degrees colder, despite all the gauges insisting nothing has changed. Back in the cabin, no one has heard the word ghost yet, but people feel something before they understand it. The turbulence, the subtle change in engine pitch, the way the plane seems to be moving with something instead of alone. A kid near the wing window presses his face to the glass and shouts that he can see cool fighter jets outside. Heads swivel, necks crane, and soon more passengers are vying for a glimpse of the gray shapes pacing their flight. Excitement in the child's voice doesn't survive long. Around him, adults begin to trade nervous looks. "I've never seen them this close," someone whispers, fingers tightening around an armrest. "Must be some sort of exercise," another offers, clinging to the most harmless explanation available. But the fighters are too aligned, too deliberate, and they're not going anywhere. The seat belts suddenly feel a little tighter, the aisle a little narrower, the air a little thinner. Fear doesn't need facts to get started. It only needs a good push. Near the galley, the flight attendant who watched Ethan confront the businessman hears the discreet chime from the interphone. She picks it up, expecting a note about turbulence or service timing, and instead hears the captain's voice, low and tense. "Can you verify a passenger for me?" he asks. "Name's Ethan Dale. Row 17A. Her stomach flips, not because of the name, but because she already knows exactly who that is. There's no mistaking the man with the mechanic's hands and soldier's posture she noticed earlier. "Yes, I've interacted with him," she replies. "Quiet, traveling with a little girl. Command wants confirmation that he's on board," the captain says. "And they want to know if he has any military background." The wording sends a cold thread of unease down her spine, as if she stepped onto a stage without a script. She hangs up, smooths her uniform with automatic motions, and turns toward the back of the plane. The length of the aisle has never felt so long. Walking past rows of seats, she senses eyes following her, picking up on the tension she can't fully disguise. People track crew the way animals track weather, studying faces for signs of storms they can't yet see. As she approaches row 17, the murmur in the cabin begins to thin, replaced by a hush that hasn't yet found its reason. She finds Ethan exactly where she left him, one hand resting on Maddie's hair, the other still gripping that faithful backpack. He looks up as she stops beside him, reading her concern before she even speaks. "Sir, I need to ask you something," she says softly, leaning in so no one else can hear. "Go ahead," he replies, voice gentle but edged in something old and unspoken. "Do you have any connection to the military? Any kind of service background?" The words land between them like metal on metal, heavy, unmistakable. Maddie, half awake now, senses that whatever this is, it's important. Silence stretches for a few beats, as if Ethan is negotiating with ghosts before answering. "Yes," he finally says, the single syllable falling with the weight of a confession. "A long time ago, in another life." The flight attendant swallows. Her instincts had been right, and somehow that doesn't make her feel any better. "It was classified work," he adds quietly, as though saying the word might wake something that's better left sleeping. "I assumed it was behind me. Forgotten." Her pulse quickens, not because of danger she feels from him, but because of the scale of whatever is happening above them. "The cockpit would like to speak with you," she says, professional tone struggling to stay intact. Ethan closes his eyes for a heartbeat, jaw tightening, as if bracing for impact. "Tell them I'm just a passenger," he answers. But he knows even as he says it that no one will believe that anymore. As she walks away, she can feel curiosity rising behind her like a tide. A man in the next row leans toward his wife, asking in a not-so-whisper if something is wrong with the guy back there. Another passenger asks if there's some sort of emergency, but she can only offer a weak, practiced, "Everything is under control." Even to her, the phrase sounds hollow, like a line from a script everyone knows is lying. The word military begins to float among scattered conversations, sticking to ears hungry for explanation. In a matter of minutes, a vague sense of unease crystallizes into focus. Something about row 17. People start watching Ethan as though he holds the missing page of a story they've been accidentally dropped into. He feels the weight of those glances, the subtle shift from anonymity to unwanted spotlight. For years, he has trained himself to be part of the scenery. Now, the scenery is turning to stare. And the thing chasing him isn't on this plane, it's coming from the sky around it. What begins as scattered whispers soon turns into a chorus of speculation aimed squarely at 17A. A woman in the middle of the cabin, who prides herself on having a good sense about people, leans toward her husband. If the military's after him, he must have done something, she says, just loud enough for others to hear. Her husband shifts uncomfortably, glancing around, aware that the words are already leaving her orbit. Criminal slips out of her mouth next, half-formed and half-believed, but it lands cleanly in nearby ears. The teenager 2 rows back, phone in hand, even without signal, immediately upgrades the story in his head. Maybe he's some kind of terrorist or spy, he mutters to his friend, eyes flicking toward the F-16 outside the window. Their imaginations begin to sprint ahead of reality, filling in blanks with movie logic and half-remembered headlines. Ethan feels the shift in the air the way an old soldier feels the first hints of an ambush. The difference is that this time, the shots are coming from people who don't even know they're firing. The businessman in the suit stands up again, not in anger this time, but in the righteous energy of someone who thinks he's speaking for the many. He turns to face Ethan, his voice carrying just far enough. If the military is chasing you, you're putting all of us in danger, he declares, ignoring how impossible getting off a plane mid-flight is. The statement hits a nerve in the rows around them. Some nod. Others look down, ashamed to agree but too afraid to disagree. You should at least tell us what's going on, he continues. We have families too. Fear and entitlement mesh into something ugly, something that points instead of asks. A mother pulls her child closer, putting one more seat between them and the perceived threat in 17A. Murmurs rise. Why won't he explain? What is he hiding? Why is the Air Force here for him? Each question digs the trench a little deeper between Ethan and everyone else on board. It's a trial without judge or jury, just a crowd that has already decided who looks guilty. Maddie wakes fully now, tugged out of sleep by the tension she doesn't understand but can't escape. She blinks, sees strangers staring, hears fragments, danger, military, because of him, and feels a cold knot form in her stomach. Daddy, why is everyone looking at us? She asks, voice smaller than usual. Ethan looks down at her and forces his face into something resembling a smile. There's just some confusion, he says, hating how weak the words sound even to his own ears. Are we in trouble? She pushes, eyes moving from his face to the F-16 shadow on the wing and back again. No, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong, he answers, and that part, at least, is ironclad truth. He pulls her into a one-armed hug, trying to block her view of the aisle with his shoulder. But children are experts at reading fear, and she can see it flickering behind his eyes no matter how tightly he holds her. For the first time in a long time, Ethan wishes he really were just the man he pretends to be. From a few rows back, an older man wearing a faded Marine Corps cap watches quietly. He sees more than the crowd does, not because he has more facts, but because he recognizes the posture of someone under fire without firing back. He hears the panic spiraling, the blame shifting, the instinct to find one face and call it the reason for everything scary. He has seen it before in other places, in other uniforms, when fear needed a target more than it needed the truth. The flight attendant stands near the galley, heart torn between duty and something that feels suspiciously like anger at the way people are acting. She knows she isn't supposed to take sides, that her job is to calm and contain, but neutrality feels like betrayal in this moment. She remembers the little girl's apology, the father's calm defense, and the word classified whispered between them. Whatever Ethan has done or hasn't done, she knows this much. He isn't the one turning this cabin into a courtroom. She takes a breath, straightens her shoulders, and prepares herself, because the next moves will not be made at her level. They will come from a voice she has never met, transmitted from somewhere far above their pay grade. In the cockpit, The captain stares at the F-16's riding shotgun on his wings and the A-10 that has now joined them. Its bulk ominous and undeniable. The radio crackles again, but this time the voice is different, deeper, more measured, carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "Captain, this is Colonel Reynolds, Air Combat Command," the man says. "We have a developing situation regarding one of your passengers." The captain keeps his eyes forward, but every nerve is tuned to the words coming through that headset. "Understood, Colonel. My primary concern is the safety of everyone on board," he replies. "Do we have a threat on this aircraft?" "Not in the way you think," Reynolds answers, a strange reassurance that does nothing to actually reassure. The first officer glances between gauges and sky, trying to reconcile a normal instrument panel with a very abnormal escort. "We have strong reason to believe a man thought to be dead is sitting in 17A, the colonel continues. "Officially, he died in action 10 years ago under classified circumstances," he says. His call sign was Reaper 6. The cockpit seems to shrink around that name, even though neither pilot has heard it before. Reaper 6 was listed Kia during a covert operation near the Syrian border, Reynolds explains, filling in the silence. He was credited with saving 18 personnel in a situation that should have killed everyone. The first officer's brows knit, trying to imagine the kind of scenario that justifies that many jets and that kind of legend. But his body was never recovered, the colonel goes on. "We found blood, shell casings, destroyed equipment, but no remains. Records say he died. Word of mouth says he became a ghost," he adds quietly. "If Ethan Dale is Reaper 6, that ghost is sitting on your airplane right now." The captain swallows, his mouth suddenly dry despite the bottle of water within arm's reach. "And the A-10?" he asks. "We both know that's not a standard escort asset for a civilian flight." "Warthogs don't babysit airlines," Reynolds agrees. "They cover high-value assets and critical missions. Today," he finishes, "their mission is to make sure a man who gave us 90 seconds of miracle doesn't vanish a second time." In the cabin, panic has almost reached its boiling point by the time the A-10's dark outline becomes visible through more windows. Passengers clutch phones they can't use, hands they suddenly don't want to let go of, and armrests that seem like lifelines. "It's a ground attack aircraft," someone mutters, having watched one too many documentaries late at night. Another voice chokes out, "Why is that thing flying next to us?" The flight attendant moves up and down the aisle, repeating variations of "please remain seated" that even she doesn't believe. Maddie stares at the looming warplane, fear mixing with the childlike awe she'd feel if she didn't sense her father's tension. "Daddy, are we in danger?" she asks again, her voice even smaller now. He wants to tell her no, that everything is fine, that this is just a weird drill or coincidence. Instead, he says nothing, and the silence is its own answer. Then, the speakers crackle, and everything stops. "Passenger Ethan Dale." A voice booms, clear and sharp, filling every inch of the cabin. "This is Viper 21, F-16 escort," the speaker announces, his tone unmistakably military. "We have a message for you, Reaper 6. The use of that call sign hits Ethan like a physical impact, knocking the air out of his lungs more effectively than any punch. Around him, passengers trade confused looks. "Reaper what?" someone whispers, like it's a character from a movie instead of a man 3 seats away. Maddie's grip tightens on his arm. She has never heard that name, but she knows from the way he reacts that it belongs to him. "For 10 years, we thought you were gone." Viper 21 continues, voice trembling just enough to betray emotion. "We never forgot the men you saved," he says. "We never forgot the 90 seconds you gave us when we were dead in the water." The words hang in the air, cutting cleanly through the fear, recasting it in a completely different light. The villain some people invented in their heads is starting to look a lot less like a monster. Inside Ethan's mind, the cabin falls away, replaced by burning sky and fractured concrete. He hears gunfire again, feels the sand stinging his cheeks, smells the acrid mix of smoke and hot metal. He's back on that broken tower, fingers numb and bleeding as he strips wires with more urgency than he's ever used on anything. The memory of each shouted coordinate, each plea for air support, replay with cruel clarity. His leg throbs phantom pain, where shrapnel once tore through muscle and bone. The world narrows to static, the taste of blood, and the thought that maybe, if he moves fast enough, someone else won't die today. Maddie's voice breaks through the echo of explosions like a small, trembling beacon. "Daddy, what does Reaper 6 mean?" she asks. He opens his mouth, but the only thing that comes out is a whisper. "It means I wasn't always just a mechanic." All around them, passengers absorbed fragments, saved 18 lives, ran into the kill zone. "We thought he was dead." The woman who called him a criminal feels shame burn up her neck, hot and inescapable. The businessman who demanded he get off the plane sits down hard, as if his knees gave out. The older Marine in the back straightens his cap, eyes shining with understanding rather than surprise. The narrative shifts in real time. The unknown man in 17A is no longer a threat. They're realizing he was the shield all along. The flight attendant stands frozen at the front of the cabin, one hand over her mouth, tears gathering without her permission. She sees the same father who calmly defended his daughter from a rude stranger and now learns he once defended 18 men from death. Fear loosens its grip on the cabin, replaced by something harder to define: awe, regret, humbled silence. For the first time since this started, Ethan feels the crowd stop, pushing him farther away. They're not ready to step closer yet, but they've stopped throwing stones. In the cockpit, Ethan holds a headset like it's a relic from another life, connecting him to voices that never truly left his memory. On a small screen, the face of an A-10 pilot appears. Young, dusty, sweat-streaked, eyes wide with disbelief. "Sir, it's really you," the pilot says, protocol slipping away. "We grew up on your story." "I'm not that man anymore," Ethan replies quietly, the words rough around the edges. "With respect, sir," the pilot answers, "you were that man long enough to change the course of a lot of lives." He swallows and starts to speak not just to Ethan, but to everyone listening in the cramped cockpit. 10 years ago, Operation Iron Resolve collapsed into a nightmare in the mountains near the Syrian border, he begins. A rescue team got pinned down. Special operators and support crew, 18 souls in a valley, turned into a firing range. Comms tower was destroyed, UAVs blind, satellites jammed. From the air, we knew our people were down there, but we were flying blind. On the ground, they were running out of ammunition and time, he says. They were minutes away from being wiped out. Then someone did something insane, the pilot goes on. One tech grabbed a field radio kit and ran straight into the kill zone. Ethan doesn't have to imagine it. He can still feel the ground pounding under his boots, hear bullets cracking the air around him. He remembers the tower, broken concrete, twisted rebar, the skeleton of a structure that should have fallen long before he climbed it. He remembers hauling himself up anyway, every step a dare thrown at the universe. He remembers not expecting to come back down alive, and climbing anyway. He climbed a half-destroyed tower under fire, the pilot narrates. Bullets hitting so close they chewed the walls to dust. At the top, with the building literally coming apart under him, he rebuilt the communications relay by hand. Fingers bleeding, leg torn up by shrapnel, clock ticking down on 18 lives, he says, voice thick. He bought us 90 seconds of clear signal, the pilot says. Just 90 seconds, but that was all we needed. 90 seconds. The co-pilot repeats under his breath, understanding for the first time how much can fit in so little time. With that brief window, we got coordinates, enemy positions, the full picture. The pilot continues. Our F-16s dropped in first, carving open the kill box with surgical strikes on the heaviest guns. The A-10s followed, clearing out what was left, ripping apart the ambush that should have erased those men. 18 walked out alive, he says. Every single one of them owes those 90 seconds everything. When the ground team went back for the tech, he adds quietly, he was gone. All they found was blood, brass on the ground, and a smashed radio, he says. So they wrote the only story that made sense. They listed Reaper 6 as killed in action, presumed dead. A medal was processed in his name. A folded flag was prepared. His file was closed. And his story turned into something passed quietly between units. A ghost on a tower who saved a platoon and disappeared. The cockpit falls silent, every person in it staring at Ethan as if seeing a stranger and an old friend at once. Ethan takes a slow breath, the kind you take when you're reopening a wound on purpose. I should have died, he says, not as drama, but as simple fact. Took shrapnel in the leg, lost too much blood, went over the edge. Local villagers found me, he continues. Smuggled me to a field hospital off the books. By the time I woke up, the operation was over, the unit was gone, and the world had already buried me on paper. He looks down at his hands, as if seeing them in desert light again. 3 of my own team died before I ever reached that tower, he says, voice breaking on their names. I heard them on the radio, he whispers. Heard them call for help I couldn't give in time. I didn't feel like a hero, he admits. I felt like the guy who lived when better men didn't. So I walked away, changed my name, disappeared, and I tried to build a life where my daughter would never have to see the man I used to be. The A-10 pilot listens, his eyes reflecting a mix of sorrow and fierce respect. Sir, those 18 men you saved didn't just go home and disappear into their couches, he says. They became leaders, instructors, fathers. They saved other people because they were alive to do it. Your 90 seconds didn't end on that tower, he adds. They're still echoing forward in time. One of those men is my commanding officer, he confesses. He heard a rumor you might be on this flight. He sent us after you, not to arrest you, not to interrogate you, the pilot says, but to thank you, and to bring you home, if you're willing to be found. The word home feels strange in Ethan's mouth, because the only home he's trusted for years is the one with a worn couch and a girl who draws airplanes. Colonel Reynolds comes back on the line, voice composed but gentler now. Mr. Dale, the Department of Defense has requested emergency landing clearance at Nellis Air Force Base, he says. They intend to give you the honors you were supposed to receive 10 years ago, Reynolds explains. Something we never had the chance to do because we were too busy believing your headstone. Ethan stares through the cockpit glass at the desert stretching far below them and the fighters riding alongside. I don't want ceremonies, he says raw. I don't want speeches. I just want peace for my daughter and myself. There's a pause. Then the colonel answers with something that sounds less like a command and more like a plea. We understand, he says. But those 18 men, they need to see the man who didn't let them die. They need to shake your hand, not just read your name on a plaque. Fragments of their conversation bleed into the cabin speakers. Saved 18 lives, thought to be Kia, Nellis Air Force Base. Passengers quietly rearrange their opinions, shame settling in where fear had once sat so comfortably. The man in the suit stares at his hands, realizing how cheaply he sold his judgment earlier. Back in 17A, Maddie clings to her father's arm, picking up just enough to know something enormous is happening. Daddy, are they mad at you or happy you're here? She asks carefully. He searches for an answer that won't break her view of him or of the world. They're surprised I'm still alive, he says, which is true, if incomplete. And some of them want to say thank you for something I did a long time ago. She studies his face, sensing how heavy those thank yous must be. If we land there, will they let us go home? She asks. Yes, he answers. If I agree to land, we'll go home afterward. I promise. In his earpiece, the colonel waits silently while Ethan weighs 10 years of hiding against 1 hour of facing everything. Finally, he exhales and nods. We'll land, he says, but only for an hour. Then I'm taking my daughter home. Copy that, Reaper 6. The colonel replies, a hint of emotion slipping into his voice for the first time. Operation Homecoming is now in effect. The captain confirms the diversion, entering new coordinates, feeling the weight of history in his fingertips. Down in the cabin, he makes an announcement that is as careful as it is unprecedented. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be making an unscheduled landing at Nellis Air Force Base, he says. You are witnessing something extremely rare. The United States Air Force is preparing to render honors to one of our passengers. He doesn't say who, but everyone knows exactly where to look. As Ethan walks back to his seat, eyes follow him, not with suspicion now, but with a reverent, uncertain kind of respect. The man in the suit steps into the aisle, blocking his way for a moment, then extends a trembling hand. I'm sorry I judged you, he says. I was wrong. Ethan shakes his hand once. Judge Kinder next time, he replies and moves on. The descent through the clouds reveals a very different kind of airport, a grid of runways, hangars, and rows of military aircraft basking in the Nevada sun. From their windows, passengers watch as the base comes into focus, flanked by desert stretching out in every direction. On one stretch of tarmac, they see something unusual, a formation of uniformed personnel standing at attention, neat as lines on graph paper. The F-16s remain on either side as FL-312 lines up with the runway, while the A-10 pulls slightly ahead, like a guide returning one of its own. The landing itself is uneventful, smooth, controlled, utterly ordinary in every technical way. But everyone on board feels the gravity of it, like stepping into a room where history has been waiting. Engines wind down as the plane slows and turns toward the waiting formation. In the aisle, people rise in their seats, trying to see over shoulders and out small ovals of glass. The captain's voice comes back over the speakers, more solemn than before. "Please remain seated until a specific passenger has disembarked," he says. "You'll understand why in a moment." A mobile stairway rolls up to the front door, and through the small window in the galley, the flight attendant sees officers waiting below. She walks back to row 17, eyes red-rimmed, but posture straight. "Sir," she says softly, "they're ready for you." Maddie grips Ethan's hand like a lifeline. "I'm coming with you," she insists before he can say anything. "You don't have to," he starts, but she cuts him off with the simple, unshakable logic of a child. "You're my daddy," she says. "I'm not letting you go alone." He nods. Unable to argue with the one truth he clings to more tightly than any other. As they step into the aisle, something remarkable happens. Passengers start to stand. Not to block him, not to challenge, but simply to rise, in quiet acknowledgement of something they don't fully understand but deeply feel. The businessman steps aside and bows his head slightly as Ethan passes. Near the front, the older Marine in the faded cap straightens as much as his spine allows and snaps into a crisp salute. Ethan returns it without thinking, muscle memory overriding the years he tried to forget. At the door, the flight attendant pauses him for a brief second, emotion catching in her throat. "For what it's worth," she says, "your daughter was never in better hands than yours." He nods, squeezes Maddie's hand, and steps out into the blazing Nevada sunlight. The heat wraps around him like a memory, different desert, same unforgiving sun. At the bottom of the stairs, a colonel waits, heels together, hand raised in a perfect salute. "Reaper 6, he says, voice steady. "Welcome home." Ethan's own voice cracks as he answers. "I'm just Ethan now." "Today," the colonel replies, "you get to be both." Behind the colonel, a line of men steps forward, older now, some with silver at their temples, scars along jaws, stiffness in their gait. One of them, a major with weathered features, stops in front of Ethan and takes a breath. "Sir, I have 3 kids because you climbed that tower," he says simply. "They exist because you refused to let us die." Another, a captain in flight gear, stands beside him. "I fly rescue missions now," he says. "I pull people out of hell because you pull me out first." One by one, they come, handshakes, embraces, simple thank yous that carry a decade of overdue emotion. Maddie watches, eyes wide, as hardened soldiers' voices crack trying to talk to her father. A sergeant kneels to meet her at eye level, pointing gently toward Ethan. "Your dad is a hero," he tells her. "I know," she replies. "He's been my hero longer than he's been yours." The ceremony that follows is short, understated, but heavy with meaning. There's a plaque, a few official words, a recounting of Operation Iron Resolve in careful, measured language. But for Ethan, speeches blur into background noise. The only things that stay sharp are Maddie's smile and the lines on the faces of the men he saved. When it's over, the colonel walks back to him with a proposition. "The offer is simple," he says. "We'd like you to consider a position as a consultant here at Nellis, training our people in field communications, survival under fire, teaching them what you learned the hard way." Ethan thinks about engines, grease, late nights at the shop, and all the reasons he chose that life. He also thinks about these young airmen who might not make it home one day because no one taught them what a dying tower taught him. "I'll do it," he says at last. "But I go home by 5 every day. I promised my daughter I'd be her dad first and everything else second." 3 months later, Ethan's mornings begin not in a garage, but in classrooms and on training grounds at Nellis Air Force Base. Instead of torque wrenches and jacks, his tools are radios, maps, and whiteboards crammed with worst-case scenarios. He stands before rows of young airmen and operators, teaching them how to keep talking to the sky when everything on the ground is falling apart. He explains how seconds can be stretched by preparation and cut short by panic. He never puts himself at the center of the stories, referring to a tech or a team rather than saying me. Still, the ones listening can hear the first-hand weight in his voice and piece it together. They respect him, but not like a myth. They respect him like a man who bled and chose to climb anyway. Every afternoon, he checks the clock with more urgency than he ever checked a mission timer. At 4:45, he shuts down equipment, turns off lights, and heads for the parking lot. His most critical deadline now is making it home by 5:30. At the front door of their small house, Maddie waits most days with a new drawing in her hand. Sometimes it's jets, sometimes birds, sometimes a stick figure girl holding hands with a slightly crooked stick figure dad. They eat dinner together, trading stories, hers about school and friends, his edited for age-appropriate consumption. One evening, she pulls a folded piece of paper from her backpack and hands it to him with shy pride. It was a school assignment, she explains. We had to write about our hero. He feels his heartbeat drum louder as he opens the page, bracing for more than he might deserve. My hero is my dad, the first line says in careful handwriting. Not because he saved people in a war, she has written, but because he came home and chose to be my dad first. His vision blurs before he can reach the end. Tears fall, but for once they're not weighted with guilt. They are tears of release, of something inside finally letting go. On his desk at Nellis, Ethan keeps two things side by side. One is a framed photo of the 18 men whose lives pivoted on 90 borrowed seconds on a broken tower. They're older now, some holding children, others in dress uniforms or flight suits, all of them very much alive. The other is one of Maddie's drawings, a big passenger plane in the center, two small fighter jets on either side like guardians. At the bottom, in imperfect English letters, she has written, "Daddy is safe here." For Ethan, that scrap of paper outweighs any commendation or citation he could ever receive. One day, an envelope arrives with a neat official seal, the medal he was issued a decade ago but never pinned to his chest. It comes with a note from Colonel Reynolds. "You earned this long ago. We know you don't need it to know who you are. Maybe someday you'll show it to your daughter." The letter ends. Until then, let it wait. Ethan holds the medal, feels its weight, then places it in a box high on a shelf. When the time is right, he'll tell Maddie the whole story, but not before she's ready, and not before he can tell it without flinching. The Legend of Reaper 6 doesn't become a movie or a best-selling memoir. It lives instead in quiet briefings, in stories told over late-night coffee between pilots and ground crews. Some say he died, others know better and simply smile when they hear the name. For most of the world, he's just a mechanic at an airfield, a man in coveralls walking across a hangar with a tool bag in hand. Passengers board planes, buckle in, and never realize that someone once ran into hell so they could have the luxury of worrying about carry-on space. They don't recognize him when he passes in the background of their travel days, and he prefers it that way. But the sky remembers. The men and women who fly under it remember. Sometimes a pilot dips a wing slightly while passing near Nellis. Not enough for reporters, just enough for those who know. It's a silent salute to a ghost who decided to come back and, against all odds, learned how to live. To them, he'll always be Reaper 6. To the little girl waiting at the window, he'll always just be Dad. On quiet mornings, when the Nevada sun is still low and the base is just waking up, Ethan stands at the stove flipping pancakes for Maddie. The sizzle of batter in the pan has replaced the crack of gunfire as the sound that marks the start of his day. He listens as she chatters about art projects, new friends, and a future full of colors, her voice filling spaces that used to echo. Every ordinary moment, a shared breakfast, a walk to the car, a goodnight hug, feels like stolen treasure from a fate that was supposed to end on a tower. The old backpack is still there, but now it carries crayons as often as it carries tools. The uniform he wears with the most pride isn't camouflage. It's a stained t-shirt after cooking, or the hoodie she tugs on when she's cold. He still dreams sometimes, of sand and fire and static, but the dreams no longer own him. He has learned that survival isn't just about not dying. It's about deciding what you live for afterward. For Ethan, that answer is simple every time he looks across the table. He lived to be a father and to teach others how to make it home to their own children, too. One day, when Maddie is older and ready, he'll pull down the box from the high shelf. He'll show her the medal, the photo, the letter, and tell her about a young man who ran into the kill zone because he couldn't stand the idea of 18 funerals. He'll admit that he made mistakes, that he lived with guilt, that he ran from who he was for a very long time. And he'll tell her what it meant to hear her call him hero, not for what he did then, but for who he chose to be afterward. Until that day, the medal can wait, the stories can stay folded, and the world can keep knowing only as much as it needs to. The jets will keep flying their patrols overhead. The base will keep training new generations who will never know how close some came to not existing at all. Every so often, someone will mention Reaper 6 in a briefing, and a younger pilot will ask, was he real? Those who know will smile and answer, real enough to save 18 lives and then disappear. What they won't say is that, somewhere not far away, that ghost is standing over a stove, burning a pancake because his daughter just made him laugh. And in that small kitchen, far from towers and kill zones and call signs, the greatest victory he ever won is sitting across from him, asking for more syrup. If this story moved you, don't let it end here in the sky. Hit like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment telling us what part touched you the most. Your support helps us bring more deep, cinematic stories of sacrifice, honor, and second chances.